Hello, Pokemon trainers, and welcome back to the second match of the Sunday broadcast of the Victory Road World Cup of VGC. Too many words merging together. Sponsored by three amazing sponsors: Elgato, Gigi Tour, and Medifee as well. Welcome back to the casting decks, Hayden. You jumped in a little bit to save me in game one, but it's great to be back for game two with yourself.
Yeah, it's nice to have fully made it through that revolving door. I'm excited to see these next couple of matches as we've hopefully finished all of the cat shenanigans from earlier.
Yeah, whenever there's a cat, there's always mischief, and that's why Incineroar is such a popular Pokemon.
Absolutely.
Well, let's take a look at how things are shaping up for today's matches regarding match two. So we're going to be showing you a match between Indonesia and Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. So Canada up 5-1 in this set already. They've managed to now secure a spot to move on, and it's actually the top spot. So they have like a nice seed going forward. So congratulations to Canada for that. We do still have a few more matches to be able to show you all. Some like spotlights from two wonderful players. We've got in the top row, we've got in the bottom, like the middle, the fifth row, we've got Jean-Marc versus Aldwin. And that's the one we will be featuring today. So a chance for Indonesia to sort of show like, oh, this was really a much closer set than it looks like right now, or for Canada to be able to demonstrate just like a more convincing victory.
Yeah, and it's going to be really nice to see Jean-Marc play. They are the manager of the Canada team and so far has kind of led the team rather than playing himself. So it'll be nice to see. I believe this will be his first game of the Victory Road World Cup. I have to now think before I say that because I'm going to say Victory World Road Cup. The first match they're going to be able to feature for Canada today.
Yeah, I'm quite excited to see Jean-Marc play. I have met the player before. We played in like Vancouver Regionals. And he's a really fun player to, I think, watch play. Some really thoughtful and slower play. So I think nice to see where we go from there. So as I mentioned, there's the 2022 Vancouver Regionals top four. The manager of the team now stepping in to play a set, and a few other top cuts as well. So Jean-Marc definitely has some accomplishments, and looking forward to seeing him play here. And on the other side, looks like we have Aldwin.
Yeah, and Aldwin has qualified for Worlds in 2021 and will now, of course, be representing Indonesia at the World Cup here. So really looking forward to seeing how they've been able to progress from 2021 into 2022 and bringing the expertise they've acquired from that previous year. Let's dive deeper into the teams as well, because we've got some really solid cores going on here. If we take a look, first of all, at Aldwin, we've got that classic Swordfish combination where we've got the Zacian followed up by the Kyogre. And again, such a formidable pair between the two. You've got your physical attacker in the form of Zacian and your special attacker in the form of Kyogre. And there's a few pesky, tricksy Pokemon on there as well, such as the Amoonguss for redirection and sleep and the Tornadus for speed control and weather control as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just sort of like the tried and true Kyogre Zacian and like a wonderful supporting cast. We've seen it many times before, and I'm excited to see how Aldwin plays it. He will have to be playing it against Jean-Marc's Charizard, Venusaur, Groudon combination, all of the Gigantamax threats, as well as the Lunala, Incineroar, and Grimmsnarl. Sort of the same composition we saw win Vancouver Regionals. Jean-Marc was knocked out by this team in a very close set. And so it's interesting to see him sort of adjusting to this. I'm curious what plans he might have for handling this sort of like common composition of the Kyogre Zacian, or if there will be a lot of offense that he will have to be able to deal with.
Yeah, very true. And it's such a flexible team as well. You know, you can go for that classic Vitadon core, you know, using the Chlorophyll ability boosted up by the sun, or you could go for the Charizard lead with Groudon as well, who will also benefit from the sunshine on the battlefield. But no Groudons, funnily enough. It's going to be Venusaur and the Grimmsnarl opposing against the Landorus and the Tornadus, so double Genie on the field.
Yeah, very interesting to see neither Kyogre nor Groudon taking the field right away. I think maybe both sides going weather is maybe really important here, and I want to make sure I can switch that in later rather than leading it and maybe being the faster Pokemon and not getting my weather up, or leading it and having the other person switch it in. So nice to see that people are sort of like starting without restricteds, without Kyogre and Groudon, and trying to get some positioning there. We know like Genies are awesome at doing that, and Venusaur always a terrifying Pokemon to see on the field, especially when it's supported by the Grimmsnarl to give it some extra bulk.
Yeah, Venusaur has to watch out for a potential flying type move coming its way. It is going to be a trick coming out from the Grimmsnarl into the Wise Protect of the Landorus here. No item switching going on. As Tornadus is able to go for the Icy Wind, just reducing the speed on Jean-Marc's side of the field and dealing significant chunk of damage to that Venusaur as well, with the side effect of an Ice type move being super effective against Venusaur. Venusaur yet to move, however, and I wonder if Sleep is going to be coming Aldwin's direction. We are, however, going to see an interesting item on that Venusaur. It's going to be the weakness policy, not something we see every day. It's going to go for the sleep powder into the protect though of that Landorus. So Jean-Marc doubling up into Landorus, a great protect by Aldwin. And that Venusaur now in a really interesting position. It's got its, attacking boost, but it is slower on the battlefield.
Yeah, such an interesting item choice on Venusaur. I don't think that's at all what I was expecting when I was seeing like the composition is the same 6 Pokemon as Gavin had won Vancouver Regionals with. But like such an interesting adaptation here where this seemingly very safe Icy Wind, you try to like just break maybe a Focus Sash, has now set up this Venusaur as this attacking monster. But at the same time, this Venusaur is slower, and so it has to worry about attacks from this Landorus or something else. And it looks like we maybe are going to see that Landorus Dynamax.
Yeah, going to be a Dynamax out the blocks here for Aldwin in turn 2. And it is going to be that Landorus indeed, possibly wanting to apply some pressure with something like a Max Airstream, just finish off that Venusaur before it can start to try and reap the benefits from the weakness policy. As well, you know, that was a Pokemon Aldwin was protecting very early on in this game, so it's going to be a prized Dynamax candidate. But Jean-Marc's going to match with the Dynamax of their very own as well.
Yeah, we're going to see potentially like an attempt to capitalize on this Venusaur. I would assume. I don't think the Grimmsnarl is going to go big. Okay, good. Just going to be a tough order to sort of see if the Venusaur is able to get off the attacks that it needs to when it is staring down this potential Max Airstream from the Landorus.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting to see the Venusaur in Dynamax. And it's going to be the Tailwind from the Tornadus as well. One Genie helping out the other, gaining even more speed momentum as Grimmsnarl is going to go for a Reflect here. No more trick shenanigans, just going to boost up the physical defense on Jean-Marc's side of the field. Landorus is going to fire off that Max Airstream into the Venusaur. It does do a huge chunk of damage, but the Reflect paying off, being able to hold on with a slither of HP on there as well, allowing Venusaur the potential to fire off a retaliation, possibly something like a G-Max Vine Lash, in order to just start getting that residual damage, even if it's not going to be the most super effective of moves. I mean, I kind of want to eat my words out. That was huge damage into the Landorus, thanks to the weakness policy boost. But it's mainly going to be able to set up this residual damage that we've seen time and time again be critical in an endgame situation.
Yeah, such an interesting way of playing Venusaur here. There was so much thought from Aldwin's side about the speed order. Like, you saw that the Grimmsnarl could have tricked the Landorus and given it maybe an Iron Ball or something to slow it down, so you sort of see the Tailwind to, like, anticipate that and still go first and attack the Venusaur, but then with that Reflect and now a Max Guard, like, there's a whole lot of attacks from Aldwin that maybe just aren't going to be able to do enough damage here.
Yeah, well, the trick finally does connect, gives Landorus a lagging tail, and the White Herb is going to go over to the Grimmsnarl. Really interesting to see the item reveal on there. Good information for Jean-Marc, and obviously resetting the stats on that opposing Grimmsnarl as well. Wise protected from the Venusaur, not going to have to take Icy Wind damage, but Grimmsnarl is going to take a little bit more chip and have its speed reduced one more time. Thankfully, Prankster has a nice way of working around speed control, and it was the double up down into that opposing Venusaur. So really nice protects from both of our players here at certain points in the game, calling the double ups nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like some wonderful sort of like getting off the one attack you need to with the Vine Lash, and now just like letting the residual damage do the work for you while you slow down Aldwin and undo all of his hard work to set this Landorus up. It's at +2 speed from Max Airstream in Tailwind, but it has that lagging tail, so no matter what, it's always going to be going last, and it's such low health, like it's going to be hard for that Landorus to be able to do anything more. Even just a Vine Lash is going to be able to finish it off. So some wonderful, like a wonderful start to this game from Jean-Marc.
Yeah, exactly. And setting up that Light Scream as well, just going to help out towards the later stages of the game when possibly something like Kyogre is going to come into the battlefield. Icy Wind is going to come off. It will be able to pick up the KO against that Venusaur and deal a little bit more chip to the Grimmsnarl. But I really do think Venusaur has kind of done its role in this match so far, doing huge damage with that weakness policy boost and setting up that residual. It is going to be able to clean up the Landorus, I believe, by the end of this match. Landorus trying to go for another speed boost here, you know, getting that Max Airstream up, not going to be beneficial to itself thanks to the lagging tail, but will certainly be able to help out the Tornadus next to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So really interesting point that with this Vine Lash doing so much damage here, it looks like the Landorus might actually just faint. And so this Landorus got off 3 whole Dynamax moves, and the Venusaur got off 1. But that one move from the Venusaur, this is why these Gigantamax Pokemon are so scary, is doing so much more work. We've seen like a full KO, there's still a turn left of Vine Lash, and sure, there's still a turn of Tailwind left on Aldwin's side, but there's so many screens from that Grimmsnarl set up to really be able to slow Aldwin down for the rest of this game.
Yeah, that's true. Jean-Marc really thinking about the kind of endgame situation here, getting those defensive measures set up as Ashen joins the field, and Lunala for Jean-Marc here. So Lunala able to apply, you know, good offensive pressure, something like a Meteor Beam going down into the opposing Tornadus would deal a huge chunk of damage, as well as, you know, just a Moongeist Beam can chip away, do some significant chunks as well. And while it still has its Shadow Shield intact as well, it's going to be able to take a very strong attack from the Zacian.
Yeah, there's a whole lot that this Lunala can do this turn, especially because it doesn't just have Shadow Shield, it has Reflect, and it doesn't just have Shadow Shield and Reflect, it has Shadow Shield and Reflect and Light Screen. There's just so much bulk coming from this Lunala right now. Not only is it a really powerful offensive threat here, but it could also even set up a Trick Room, depending on what's in the back, to be able to sort of like handle... You can see that Aldwin's going for this fast game with Tailwind and Airstream, and you might be able to just flip that on its head.
That's so true. Lunala could really be pulling out all the tricks here. The Hurricane, first of all, is going to land down onto the Grimmsnarl, so that is another Pokemon down on Jean-Marc's side of the field. As the Zacian capitalizes on the potential Trick Room being set up by this Lunala and goes for the substitute, just going to hide behind it. As Lunala does indeed go for that Trick Room that you mentioned, Hayden. Going to be twisting the dimensions and bringing the speed advantage back to Jean-Marc's side of things.
Yeah, Zacian does take a lot of damage for it, but that substitute is really useful. I think if you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to handle the fact that this Lunala is going to be able to do whatever it wants this turn, I think that's a really smart play. We know that Zacian can do a ton of damage, but it was going to have trouble doing that damage this turn, with Reflect still having 1 or 2 more turns left, and with that Shadow Shield intact. So sort of like saying, I'm going to save this momentum I have right now for later by setting up the substitute, and maybe it'll help me weather the storm of this Trick Room. I think that's a really smart play.
Yeah, it certainly is. And Tornadus is in a difficult situation here. You know, anything really from that Lunala is going to be able to pick up the KO against it. And Groudon can go for some good damage against that Zacian. You know, if you're going for something like a Precipice Blades, obviously you're not going to hit the Tornadus, but that's why Lunala is your sidekick right next to you. It can deal with the Tornadus while you break the substitute on Zacian and leave it exposed for more damage later on. I think if you're Aldwin here, you have to play quite defensively in order to stall out these Trick Room turns.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just so much pressure for like a whole 4 turns still, and we see that the Zacian's actually maybe just going to go for an attack here, and that's such a tough play. Maybe you have to bank on a Precipice Blades miss at this point.
Yeah, not going to be getting one on this occasion, however. It is going to go to the substitute, so Zacian is going to be able to jump out from behind it and at least have that preservation from Precipice Blades in this turn, but it's going to have to dodge a couple more of those if it wants to be able to hang out in the rest of this game 1. The Lunala is going to go for the Meteor Beam, however, going to be absorbing all that space power, getting a special attack boost, and we'll be able to use the Power Herb to turn the 2-turn charge move into a 1-turn. And Meteor Beam so powerful, it does manage to connect down onto that opposing Tornadus and will just completely obliterate it from the field, bringing both players down to just 2 remaining Pokemon.
Yeah, 2 remaining Pokemon, but the 2 restricteds on Jean-Marc's side looking a whole lot more commanding. We will see the Behemoth Blade come out, but with Reflect, I believe, still up, and Shadow Shield. Oh, actually, that's quite a bit of damage. I was not expecting to see that. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Even with that critical hit, it does look like there's a whole lot of offensive pressure coming up from Jean-Marc's side, but if there's a Pokemon that can handle something like a Groudon and a lower health Lunala, Kyogre definitely seems like the right fit for the bill.
Yeah, I mean, that Reflect has now worn off at the end of that turn. I believe Light Screen is still in play, however, but even with Light Screen in play, Kyogre versus a Groudon with the Kyogre in the rain is certainly something Groudon has to be careful of, and that's why, you know, you want to be able to try and deal huge damage with the Kyogre. Something like the Precipice Blades is going to be able to connect on both of Aldwin's Pokemon as long as it finds its accuracy mark. With the Lunala able to follow up into Kyogre could be exactly what is needed in order to take out this game. But it's interesting that we're at this endgame stage, Hayden, and all 4 restricteds are on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mentioned this like at the very start that it was really interesting. Everyone's picking their not restricteds to lead and trying to get the right momentum for the end. And I think I'm curious to see if this happens in game 2 as well. We'll have to watch for it. For this game,
Yeah, going to be the Precipice Blades from the Groudon into protect of the Zacian, wanting to just stick around for one more turn. It does find its mark down onto the opposing Kyogre, does over 50%, and, you know, with the kind of bulk that we know Kyogre has, I'm not sure if Lunala is going to be able to pick up the KO against it, particularly after this Thunder. It is going to be able to survive, however, and Kyogre does take a little bit of damage with the Life Orb, and considering Lunala is at +1 special attack, this Moongeist Beam is going to be cutting it close onto the opposing Kyogre. We know it does have, you know, pretty substantial special defense, but Kyogre will be felled, leaving just the Zacian to deal with both of these restricted pairs, and they seem unstoppable at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about this game being the battle of positioning your restricteds in the end, and it seems like Jean-Marc's been able to do that a little bit better. One really interesting point in that last turn is that we saw the moveset on Kyogre, it did not have Origin Pulse, I don't believe. And so not being able to go for that this turn to try to be able to pick up the KO on Lunala and on Groudon, I'm not sure if that would have been a KO or not, but that's just like such a big blow to Aldwin, and I think we're gonna have to see if Aldwin's able to maybe position Kyogre better, that like this Kyogre is built to be going first and going for those Water Spouts or going for a Dynamax, and I'm curious if Aldwin will be able to use those tools in a different way in the next game.
Yeah, that's the thing. If your only spread move is going to be the water spout, and you know that you're going to be like slower in Trick Room than the Groudon, you're going to take a huge chunk of damage in that Precipice Blade, leaving the water spout essentially null and void. So having something like Origin Pulse would have been a really good position for the Kyogre in that situation. But just, Lunala had something to say about it as well and just picked up the KO straight against it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really important information too that the Lunala is faster than the Kyogre. That's something I wouldn't have been sure about before the game. Because if Lunala had been slower, then that Trick Room would have been clearly the win for that game. Like you can just finish off the Kyogre before anything happens. But because of the speed order being the way it is, maybe Jean-Marc's not going to be able to go for Trick Room next time, or we'll have to plan differently around that Kyogre. Or maybe you just say, I now know you don't have Origin Pulse, and this is exactly the right plan going forwards.
Yeah, and speed was integral to that particular match. We saw, Tailwind, we saw Icy Wind, we saw Max Airstreams, we saw Trick Room. There's so many different ways that the speed control can be manipulated in this game from both of our players as well. So it's going to be interesting as we dive into game 2 about what role speed is going to play again, because you now know what mode the players have a preference for. We've got very speedy on one side, and then we have got the Trick Room utility on the opposing side.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if both players go for the same plan, or if there's maybe an adjustment saying we've seen almost every speed control method that there is, I think, in this game. We've got Trick Lagging Tail and everything else. That's so
Lagging Tail as well.
I think that I'm curious to see. It seemed like that Tailwind and Airstream plan did not go very well for Aldwin. And so I'm not sure if maybe there's a play to try to figure out, can I bring some other Pokemon that maybe have a little bit more bulk? Can I maybe try to just do a little bit more damage that Trick Room can't go up versus bringing that Tornadus?
Well, the Venusaur is going to remake an appearance side by side with the Grimmsnarl, but it's going to be a shake-up on the Zacian side of things for Aldwin. So Zacian and Tornadus coming out into the fray here. But I want to see how this Venusaur is going to be played. It was very interesting in Game 1, and we know it's carrying that weakness policy, so it's something you have to watch out for.
Yeah, I think this Venusaur was so integral to the start of that match, being able to position Jean-Marc to be able to do that Trick Room near the end. And so I'm curious if it's going to be able to do the same thing again, or if maybe Aldwin bringing the more immediate damage from the Zacian is going to be able to do just a whole lot of damage. We've got Behemoth Blade, which will ignore the boosts of bulk for Venusaur if it does Gigantamax. The downside is you do have to worry about that sort of play that Jean-Marc never went for last game, but could this game of switching in that Groudon and getting the Venusaur to be suddenly fast, and maybe it can just do a Sleep Powder or get off that Vine Lash and do a whole lot of damage to the other side of the field.
That's very true. Jean-Marc certainly has a utility with the Pokemon in the back. Something like the Groudon switch would be really interesting to see, and a nice adjustment from the strategy played out in Game 1. But there's going to be no Dynamax and no switching. It's going to be a straightforward Tailwind from this Tornadus, boosting up the speed on Aldwin's side of the field. Grimmsnarl using his Prankster ability to go, hey, I don't care about speed control. I'm going to set up the Reflect and protect my side from the potential attacks from this Zacian. It's going to go for its tried and trusted Behemoth Blade, finding its mark down onto the opposing Grimmsnarl. Is going to be able to get a one-hit KO despite the Reflect in play. It is super effective damage. It's a +1 Zacian. It's going to be powerful, and that can relieve Aldwin of having to deal with such pesky shenanigans from that opposing Grimmsnarl. Zacian is going to have to take an Earth Power, but there was no weakness policy boost on that Venusaur, so it's going to be able to take it reasonably well.
Yeah, so some wonderful damage coming off from Aldwin's side of the field. You do get the Reflect on Jean-Marc's side, and Lunala gets to come in, so that's some pretty cool potential for a momentum switch. But really nice to see just sort of like an adjustment saying, I saw that the Grimmsnarl was a problem before. I'm just going to get the knockout. I know I can take an attack from the Venusaur. Something that is interesting, though, is just the presence of Venusaur on the field means that Aldwin felt like he needed to go for the Tailwind to stop that Groudon switch in. And now we see that Jean-Marc's just following this Trick Room game plan, same as before. But in order to account for every option from Jean-Marc, Aldwin still had to go for that Tailwind. And it's really just quite a tough catch-22 for Aldwin. You've just set up Tailwind to make your side faster as your opponent is now coming in and has the option for Trick Room. We'll have to see if Jean-Marc goes for that or just for damage, but it's an interesting point to the strategy for the rest of the set.
Yeah, that's a great observation. The mind games are certainly real with that Lunala on the battlefield. It's going to be the Dynamax coming out for Jean-Marc, however, and we're going to see the Venusaur once again jump into its Gigantamax form. It's still in it's got a lot of HP at this point. It hasn't had its weakness policy activated, but I think if it can get that residual damage up again, that was so pivotal for Jean-Marc to be able to have, applying pressure to the opposing side. Lunala's just going to go for a Protect, however. It's on the field threatening Trick Room, but we won't see it happen this particular turn. As the Zacian does go for the Behemoth Blade, it is going to find its mark onto that opposing Venusaur and deal a significant chunk of damage, but I think Venusaur's going to be able to take this and can then potentially fire off something like a Max Quake and deal with that opposing Zacian. The Icy Wind, however, is the thing to watch out for. We know that it can deal super effective damage. Venusaur is in the red HP, but it's able to hang on with just a Slither, leaving Venusaur free to potentially set up that G-Max Vine Lash and get its weakness policy activated.
What an incredibly important survival here. That would have been your Dynamax just completely gone, and instead this is like a Max Quake that is absolutely strong enough to take out the Zacian. A special defense boost on the Lunala while it still has Shadow Shield, while Reflect is up. There's just so much momentum that just revolved around this one clutch survival in this one turn.
Yeah, I mean, the Grimmsnarl got the Reflect up on the battlefield, but it got KO before it could set up that Light Screen. So if you're Jean-Marc, you're kind of talking to the Venusaur like, hey, you've got to kind of pull your weight now and help defensively, get those Max Quakes up to help Lunala out, potentially going for something like a Trick Room a little later on. I mean, as well, if Aldwin brings out that Kyogre, if special attacker, going into the special defense boost, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Jean-Marc to be able to deal with it. On the flip side, however, the Venusaur is at very limited HP at this point. Not, it's not going to be able to survive, I think, anything here. It's probably only on a couple of hit points. And whether it's living on kind of borrowed time to be able to deal any damage thanks to the Icy Wind is yet to be determined. If it's something like a Max Guard with a Trick Room, that could give Venusaur some longevity to stay in this match.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point to make, that this Lunala did protect when no one attacked into it, and there is still a lot of momentum lost from having this Venusaur low. We saw the Tornadus can just Icy Wind and get that KO potentially. We will see that the Venusaur just has to switch out because of it, I think.
Yeah, we never really normally see this, a Dynamax Pokemon switch out, particularly after only one turn of Dynamax, but it could be what Jean-Marc needs in order to preserve the Pokemon for later on in the match. Groudon's going to join the field as well, bringing up the Sun and protecting defensively the side of Jean-Marc even more by stopping these Max Geysers from dealing such formidable pressure in the rain. It's going to be the Dynamax, however, for Aldwin a little bit later in this game 2 than in game 1, and I'm not surprised to see it be that Kyogre.
Yeah, so Kyogre coming out and Dynamaxing, but in the Sun, it's going to be doing so much less damage here, and so that's such a wonderful switch in from the Groudon to like sort of slow down Aldwin just a little bit.
Exactly, and Tornadus going for that Icy Wind once again. If Jean-Marc is going for the Trick Room, this could be a really nice move, helping it out a little bit in that different speed environment, but it is critically breaking the Shadow Shield on Lunala, leaving it a little bit more exposed to any follow-up move. It's going to be the Max Geyser from that Kyogre as well, and either target would be good here for the Kyogre. I think going into the Lunala, just trying to chip away at it a little more, but you can see the defensive plays really coming through, and the Sun that Groudon set up as well, helping to bring down the power of that Max Geyser. The rain has set up, however, so you do need, if you're Jean-Marc, to think, hey, how am I going to be able to deal with this going forward? Possibly switch out the Groudon, bring it back in a little bit later on. You could always sack that Venusaur in the back, but you need to capitalize on the fact you've got Trick Room up, and Groudon and Lunala was so powerful in game 1. Could they be good again in game 2 together?
Yeah, so we have a very similar situation as you mentioned from last time, where you've got Groudon and Lunala in Trick Room. But this time, there's still 2 Dynamax turns for this Kyogre, and even though Groudon did this wonderful job of setting up Sun for a little bit, that Max Geyser resetting the rain means there's so much pressure from Aldwin at this point. I'm curious sort of like how you handle both wanting to do offensive pressure with this Precipice Blades, but also knowing everything onto this Kyogre is technically half damage because it's at doubled HP.
Exactly, you can see how much little damage that Precipice Blades did to the Dynamax Kyogre compared to the undynamax version in that game 1. Lunala is going to be absorbing its space power and trying to go for Meteor Beam once again. Most likely going to be trying to target down into that opposing Tornadus, but then again, every little helps against the Kyogre at this point. You want to try and stop it in its tracks, but instead it is going to be that Tornadus. It's going to be surviving on 1 hit point, however, and with the rain in array at the moment, then it's not going to have any residual damage, as Kyogre's free to go for a Max Geyser, this time in the rain.
Yeah, so much damage potentially coming out from this, and it is just a KO in the Lunala, so Jean-Marc down to just Groudon and Venusaur, but not in the Sun. That's a really tough position to come back from.
Yeah, and Tornado is going to be able to use the rain to its advantage as well and go for the Hurricane into the opposing Groudon. Going to be able to take it reasonably well, but it is going to have the little Ducks of Doom bringing that confusion to the fray. And that's something Jean-Marc is going to have to be crossing his fingers about, that the confusion doesn't take over Groudon. It does, however, give the opportunity to bring this Venusaur in. And I know we were kind of saying it's sad the Sun's not on the field for the Groudon's sake, but actually Venusaur, I think, is going to benefit in Trick Room from not having it on the battlefield.
A wonderful point to make, that yes, this Venusaur has low hit points and it won't be able to sort of like close out a game outside of Trick Room, but we do still have 3 more turns where Jean-Marc might be able to do something really useful, and we've seen that this Venusaur has Sleep Powder. If there's any way to sort of slow down a Dynamax Pokemon, we know that one of those ways is just putting it to sleep. And this Kyogre has not taken the time to set up Electric Terrain, even though we've seen that it has Thunder earlier. So definitely a bit of a tough position that Aldwin, in order to sort of maintain the pressure, isn't able to account for this one piece. And so we'll have to see if there's a way that this Venusaur can maybe switch things a little bit, or if Jean-Marc is still a little bit too far behind in terms of hit points.
Well, Kyogre saying, hey, I'm not going to take a Sleep Powder, don't come my way, goes for the Max Guard, as Groudon has to roll the dice and will not be confused, able to go for the Shadow Claw and deal with the Tornadus before it applies threats to the Venusaur with something like another Hurricane. Obviously, we know nothing Venusaur is going to do is going to affect that Max Guard, but you were right, Hayden, in your prediction. It was going to be that Sleep Powder.
Yeah, so the Sleep Powder goes off, but doesn't put Kyogre to sleep. And now we get to see this wonderful fourth pick that Aldwin made, knowing that, oh, hey, Trick Room is how Jean-Marc won the last game, and Landorus wasn't useful. Maybe I'll bring the Amoonguss. And now we just saw all this pressure from Venusaur on Kyogre. Now there's just as much pressure in terms of like this Grass Poison type putting you to sleep from Aldwin's side onto that Groudon.
Yeah, I love seeing this little Amoonguss come into play. It's one of those Pokemon that you can just have up your sleeve and when Trick Room's on the field and then just plop it on the battlefield, and it can be so disruptive. It's actually going to go for the Pollen Puff into that Venusaur. It's the slowest thing at the moment and it's going to be able to pick up the KO against it, breathing a sigh of relief for the Kyogre, I am sure. Once again, Precipice Blades is going to fall down to whether it's going to be confused or not. No, breaks through confusion and connects on both Pokemon, picking up the KO against the Kyogre and doing so much damage to that little mushroom as well. Another one of those Precipice Blades is going to be able to pick up the KO against the Amoonguss.
Yeah, so quite a wonderful bring Amoonguss in, but because that Venusaur was alive with just that little sliver of HP, Venusaur putting in just a little more work for Jean-Marc, having the Amoonguss need to target the Venusaur, and now I think this Amoonguss might have to be counting on this Groudon staying asleep for quite some time instead of just a turn or two.
Yes, it's an uphill climb for this Amoonguss, but hey, it could possibly do it here. If it wants to go for those Pollen Puffs into the Groudon, it depends how much damage it's going to do. You know, Groudon's sitting at around 50%, and Trick Room has now gone back. You know, it's disappeared from the fray. Groudon is going to be faster. And Pollen Puff, I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. You might need to have a Precipice Blade miss. First of all, Pollen Puff is going to connect. However, let's see how much it does. Oh, it is minimal damage, Hayden.
Yeah, that's going to be very tough for Amoonguss to be able to get a KO. Groudon only has one more turn of sleep, even in the worst case. And so unless this Pollen Puff does like a super critical hit, or this Groudon maybe misses some attacks, it's going to be really tough for this Amoonguss to be able to close out this game. It was such a brilliant pick, but it's just not quite enough to finish this off for Aldwin.
Yeah, and if Groudon, you know, is carrying something like Fire Punch, it would probably be a wiser move slot for Jean-Marc to lock into, as it's going to be able to have that accuracy. It does wake up. It is still confused, however. That is something you do have to contend with, but it is going to be able to break through, go for the Heat Crash, super effective damage onto the Amoonguss, and pick up the game and set for Jean-Marc for Canada.
Wonderful for Jean-Marc to get a win with a Pokemon the same colors as his country's flag. Just getting through confusion and sealing up that game. But a very close game too. I think it's really nice whenever you're able to see like adjustments from players. I thought that Amoonguss was so smart near the end. Like knowing that you could set up the Tailwind and maybe bait a Trick Room because maybe that Amoonguss can come in. Mm-hmm. But Jean-Marc being able to sort of play things well, and the strength of that Venusaur surviving just kept on putting in work for Jean-Marc to be able to finish off that game. So like a wonderful set to be able to watch.
Yeah, I would have maybe liked the Amoonguss to come in a little bit earlier in that Trick Room, because it could be such a key Pokemon and you could see how slow it was moving in comparison to the other Pokemon. So possibly if, you know, you've been able to get it in a little earlier, it could have been able to do a little bit more disruption. But I really enjoyed being able to broadcast this set with you, and I really enjoyed seeing Venusaur being used in such an unconventional way. Yeah,
absolutely. Seeing Venusaur playing like primarily to bulk, saying, I know, okay, Charizard is also on this team. If I just need damage, that's what I'm going to look at. Venusaur is here to survive things, and you have to be so careful about when you try to target it down, because if you do what Aldwin did, this Venusaur will survive and get a weakness policy boost, and suddenly it can take out his Ashton. I thought that was so interesting to see, and I'm curious how this Venusaur was trained, if, like how close of a roll that was versus if it was just a guarantee of that Behemoth Blade, Icy Wind, not getting that KO.
Exactly, and it's definitely something I'm going to test out when I go back on my Switch a little bit later, kind of mess around a little bit with Weakness Policy Venusaur. But we're nearly at the halfway point for Sunday's broadcast. We've got 3 more games to bring you, so don't go anywhere, take a short break, and we'll be back with match number 3 very soon.